Hello. Welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Ava Johnson, and today we're going to be diving into one of the most dramatic turning points in global history, the 1973 OPEC oil crisis. In order to completely understand the crisis, we need to remember what the early 1970s felt like. The world was just in transition. The Vietnam War was ending, the Cold War was at its height, and globalization was just beginning to shape. Energy seemed limitless, economies were booming, and many believed that the post-World War II prosperity would never end. Oil was cheap, and no one imagined that a few countries in the Middle East could bring an entire global economy to its knees. That illusion shattered in 1973. Imagine waking up and finding gas prices have quadrupled. Lines of cars wrapped around the gas stations for blocks, businesses shutting down early in order to save energy, and global government panics. What caused this sudden chaos wasn't just about oil. It was about war, politics, and power. Behind the 1973 oil shock was a fierce Middle Eastern conflict, the Yom Kippur War, and a group of nations ready to use their oil as their ultimate weapon. The background, the storm before the crisis. To understand the crisis, we have to rewind to the late 1960s. The Middle East had already become one of the most politically tense regions in the world. In 1967, Israel fought and won the Six-Day War, defeating Egypt, Syria, and Jordan. Israel captured major territories in the war, like the Sinai Peninsula, the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, and the Golan Heights. This left many nations in Arab countries humiliated and determined to regain what they had lost. Meanwhile, the Western countries, especially the United States, became increasingly dependent on Middle Eastern oil to fuel their post-war economies. By 1973, the two fuses were already lit. One political fuse and one economic. The Yom Kippur War. On October 6, 1973, as Israel celebrated Yom Kippur, a day, one of the holiest days in the Jewish calendar, Egypt and Syria launched a surprise attack. What was the goal? To take back the territories that they had lost, specifically the Sinai Peninsula and the Golan Heights. The war caught Israel off guard at first, but with U.S. support, including emergency weapons shipments authorized by the current president, Richard Nixon, Israel quickly regained the upper hand. For Arab nations, although, this U.S. intervention confirmed what they had long believed, that the West, particularly in the United States, was firmly on Israel's side. That's when the Organization of Arab Petroleum Exporting Countries, or OAPEC, decided to retaliate. Their weapon was not guns, bombs, or other military equipment. It was oil. The oil embargo. On October 17th, 1973, OPEC announced an oil embargo against the U.S. and other nations supporting Israel, including Canada, Japan, the Netherlands, and the UK. They didn't just stop selling oil. They also cut production by 5% each month, sending a message: if you support Israel, you pay the price. Quite literally. Before this, oil had been cheap and plentiful, but almost overnight, the price per barrel jumped from $3 to nearly $12. That is a 400% increase, resulting in one of the most biggest shocks in economic history. It wasn't just about economics. It was about the tool of leverage. Arab nations were saying for decades, you've dictated terms to us, and now we control the lifeblood of your economies. The impact in America and beyond. In the United States, panic spread quickly. Long lines formed at gas stations, sometimes lasting for hours. Some stations ran out of fuel entirely. The government imposed speed limits, daylight saving measures, and urged people to carpool or even turn down their thermostat. Across the Atlantic, Europe and Japan faced similar energy crises. The industrial production slowed, inflation skyrocketed, and airlines grounded their flights. It was the first time since World War II that the Western nations felt truly vulnerable, not to a military attack, but to an economic chokehold. And suddenly, energy policy became a matter of national security. What made the 1973 crisis so remarkable wasn't just about the rise in prices. It was how deeply it shook international relationships. For decades, Western powers had dominated the oil trade. They controlled production through multinational corporations known as the Seven Sisters, companies like Exxon, Shell, and BP. But after the embargo, those roles reversed. The oil-producing nations suddenly had all the leverage. This shift gave rise to a new era, where control of natural resources became just as powerful as military strength. The Soviet Union saw an opportunity, strengthening ties within the Arab nations. The U.S., on the other hand, began courting countries like Saudi Arabia, forming partnerships that still shape global politics today. Economically, the impact was enormous. The Western world entered a period known as stagflation, a mix of stagnant growth and high inflation. Ordinary families struggled with rising prices not only for gas, but for food, heating, and even basic goods. Meanwhile, oil-exporting countries experienced a massive influx of wealth. Cities like Dubai and Kuwait transformed almost overnight. But the sudden money also created inequality and corruption in some nations. In short, it wasn't just an oil crisis. It was a global power realignment, one that permanently changed how nations interacted on the world stage. The crisis catapulted OPEC to global prominence. For years, Western oil companies had dictated pricing and production. Now OPEC nations were trying to take control of their resources. Oil-rich states like Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and the United Arab Emirates saw massive profits. They reinvested this wealth into infrastructure, education, and global finance, literally turning deserts into modern cities almost overnight. But for oil importing nations, the crisis sparked a long-term shift towards energy independence, leading to new policies, nuclear power investments, and even the creation of the U.S. Strategic Petroleum Reserve in 1975. Politically, the oil crisis pushed the U.S. to pursue a more active role in Middle East peace. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger engaged in shuttle diplomacy, flying in between Middle Eastern capitals to broker agreements to find peace between Israel and Egypt. His efforts eventually led to the 1974 disengagement agreements and later the Camp David Accords in 1978, where Egypt became the first Arab nation to formally recognize Israel. It also reshaped how countries approach global relations. It showed that economic power could be just as effective than military might in changing political outcomes. The 1973 oil crisis was more than just an economic event. It was a turning point in modern history. It showed how intertwined our world had become, how a regional war could ripple across every nation, and how energy could be wielded as both a necessity and a weapon. Its echoes still shape today's debates, from oil prices to climate change to global conflict. So, next time you fill up your gas tank, remember, behind every drop of oil lies a story of power, history, people, and politics. A story that began half a century ago, when the oil shocked the world. Thank you for tuning in. Again, I'm your host, and if you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to share and stay tuned for more stories that connect our past to our present.